Depopulation of the Mesa Verde region was really transformative, I think, for Pueblo people. When people move away from the Mesa Verde region, the kinds of architecture and the buildings that they were constructing, you don't see some of those kinds of architectural features when they move into New Mexico and central Arizona. What you see, one thing that disappears is that towers, which are very common in the region, are no longer being built. And so some of that kind of, the tower architecture and some of the enclosing walls that are associated with them, we no longer see at ancestral Pueblo villages.
But there's also a lot of things that have changed over time, and this is something that I think many people don't really appreciate. Many people in the public have this image of American Indian peoples as peoples that are sort of timeless, that have had an intrinsic character to them that has been that way from the beginning of time. And one of the things we're learning from the Village Ecodynamics Project is that really every human community has history, and every human community changes over time. And we can see lots of these changes in Pueblo history as well. One of the strongest changes that I see is that when Pueblo ancestors left the Colorado area and moved to New Mexico, one of the things that they did is they created communities that were much more communal in outlook. In the Colorado area, when an archaeologist walks around in one of these old villages here, it's pretty easy to tell where each house is. Each house is pretty distinct because the architecture of those houses is just noticeable and distinctive. In New Mexico, after this period of migration, the villages that were made by presumably the same people that had just been living in these smaller villages made these communities that were much more communal in appearance, where you really can't tell where one house ends and the next one begins. And it appears as though there was a real change in the people's understanding of what it meant to be a part of a community and to live in a community. And the sense I get from it is that there were a number of changes in a sense, almost philosophical concepts of Pueblo culture that really encouraged people to work more closely together at a larger scale than they had before. And I think those kinds of changes are still embedded in Pueblo culture still today. I think you can actually see it in action if you go and visit a Pueblo now.
Although we see lots of continuity between the northern study area and the southern study area, that is between the central Mesa Verde and the northern Rio Grande, there are some specific differences, and these differences begin to appear in the northern Rio Grande in a period that archaeologists call the Late Coalition period, from AD 1275 to 1325. And this is emerging as a really important period in Pueblo past. The people who are coming down from southwestern Colorado at this time have a number of practices, traditional practices, like kivas that are oriented towards particular lineage groups, certain styles of black and white ceramics, a number of very specific traits that seem to get lost between southwestern Colorado and the northern Rio Grande. And by the time these populations arrive in the northern Rio Grande, they appear to be trying to fit in with the local populations that are already here. And the hybridization of the two forms of society begin to make a really new kind of society in the Late Coalition period. And the Late Coalition is the time in which we see the first villages forming in the northern Rio Grande. We believe that the certain traditions in southwestern Colorado may have been almost completely submerged by the traditions that these people began to form in the northern Rio Grande.